So, you know, it's important, isn't it? Because the relationship between mitigation and adaptation is crucial. And that's to say that, okay, when we think we're planning for certain adaptation outcomes, but actually we are as yet failing to get hold of global emissions. If we don't get hold of global emissions, then our adaptation pathway is going to be extraordinary. There is no way of adapting to unmitigated climate change. It's simply not doable. So we have to have this enormous bearing down on transformations of energy sources, which we've heard about today, and for which there are immensely positive solutions. But then also begin to deal with this really critical issue about adaptation. Three rock and roll things I think about adaptation: time, geography and justice. And the Planning and Climate Change Coalition, which is still there, if you'd like to join, I think said in its recent manifesto that we're planning for the wrong geography over the wrong timescale with the wrong scientific assessment, but everything else is fine. And that's based, I suppose, a little bit on local government performance. It's great to see that in some metrics, in terms of floodplain development, messages maybe are sinking in, but in other ways I think we've got an enormous challenge. That challenge, it struck me, for example, is played out partly in terms of what we talk about unpermitted development, losing control of the key levers of being able to control the built environment. Actually, for public interest outcomes, we need to find a way of thinking about that, and government has to join these two things together. So, what comes out of the committee has to be joined up with the ideology and treasury that actually what we need to do is simply, if we lose control of these things, that's great for the economy, who cares? But if you lose control of these things, getting control back takes time, and we don't have time for that kind of experiment. I'm also conscious that a journalist said to me, this is going to get this is a final focus question. How many static caravans are there on the Lincolnshire coast? If you get anywhere near this, there'll be a free piece of cake. Go on. Nobody want to guess? 700 I'm bid. 100,000. Anybody else? $250,000. There is actually 28,000 static caravans in flood-risk zones on the Lincolnshire coast. And there used to be a rule, as you know, that they could only occupy, wasn't I think from April the 1st until September the 30th. They've extended it in many places by at least a month either end. The reason that was there was obviously because of potential storm surges in the back end of either end of the winter, essentially. So, in some senses, we've got all sorts of issues arising that seem to me to be of grave concern, and the reason that we're relaxing these issues is about economic development. We have yet to grasp fully, I think, that building climate resilience is the foundation of economic resilience as well. If you can prove resilience in whole, then you've got an economy to build upon. So the three things I talked about: time, geography, justice, time scale. I think again all the presentations we've had today are about thinking about 50 to 100 years. This is perfectly normal, but honestly, how many planning authorities are thinking in their spatial plans for 50 to 100 years? Actually, the OPPF does have some content on that, but I have yet to come across one on that Lincolnshire coast who's planning for that kind of time scale. I think 3 or 4 authorities are beginning to think where floodplains might be as a result of coastal change, but that's a minority sport. And very importantly, nowhere that I've found yet is there this transformational idea about adaptation. So it's about more of the same. We concentrate development and we try and flood defend it in vulnerable areas. And that is actually, it's not a cost-effective solution for reasons that we've heard. What I don't see in Lincolnshire, and I'll probably get chased out of it with pitchforks and lit torches, is suggesting that a highly sustainable community somewhere else would be a better option than packing development into the coastal strip. Especially, as I said, because sea level rise will not stop at 2100. There's capacity for 3, 4, 5 metres over time, particularly if we don't get control over the CO2. So actually we need to be thinking about where these cities, towns, places will be in 100 to 150 years. So that time scale is important, and planning needs to transform itself all the time. On geography, those resources that came up about who's doing adequate flood risk assessments, who's producing a strategy, is important. But when you think that along the coast, from the Thames to the Humber, you've got 32 authorities, all planning essentially separately. What we need plainly is a combined authority, is it not? Seize the agenda, a combined authority for the East Coast, sharing resources, supporting each other, using the power of combined authorities to deal with flood risk. We've got to get the government to think about geography. I don't think there is a geography left in government. And that's kind of, we do need people who can read maps. Ever so important, it really is. Because thinking about that geography and then thinking about strategic consequences of it, demographics is equally important. And then finally, justice. There is an enormous aspect of climate adaptation around social justice. And I think if JRF, there isn't anyone from JRF here, I think, but if they're in the room, they would be pointing very hard at their climate just resource that they developed with, amongst other people, the Environment Agency in Manchester University. If you've not seen it, I thoroughly recommend it. It's a fantastic resource. It's actually related, in a way, to the evolution graphs diagram that the TCPA worked on. And the message is very simple. It's about using GIS systems to map vulnerability against, social vulnerability against climate hazard, to give you a much more effective planning tool for making local plans about how to develop in the future. But the interesting thing about it, given I've only got 30 seconds left, is the way that it systematically understands social vulnerability, particularly in terms of all sorts of dimensions of age, disability and other issues, and of course overall perhaps poverty. And there is a very worrying coincidence between that vulnerability and Lincolnshire. Some of those East Coast communities are actually real examples, aren't they, where poverty and vulnerability come together in a very powerful way. So that social justice dimension is absolutely critical. Isn't it ironic that it's exactly those communities, in my experience, who are almost the most climate denial politically? Yeah, and that means, again, we have to have a transformation about the way we talk about this agenda. We have to be able, not just as I do, go, there's a big shark in the water, what do we do? We have to be able to offer pathways of hope for those communities, both in terms of investment in public affairs and perhaps future pathways elsewhere. So I think as a summary where we stand at the moment on the climate debate, and this conference has offered, I think, so much hope on many of those issues, but somehow or other in this government, in the next 5 years, we've got to see a transformation of attitudes at the national political level, a transformation of attitudes at the local level, and also a rediscovery of the big picture mechanisms that can actually help the nation have a sustainable future. Because if we don't do that, I fear that there will be a significant climate crisis, and we'll move only after that crisis. It will be really good if we were bright enough as a nation to be fully prepared rather than wait for it to happen.